You are the CEO and co-founder of Nextmv, which is a decision automation platform for developers, in which, as a full disclosure, I have the privilege and honor of being a very proud investor. And I'd love to start the conversation with a little bit of your background and your journey to starting the company.
Yeah, definitely. So my background is actually in systems engineering. I started out working at Lockheed Martin in kind of the ballistic missile space and radar space, which is not a common startup background, to be sure. But it was really interesting because after spending a bunch of years there doing modeling and simulation for the Navy, I ended up landing at a startup in Philadelphia called Zoomer, which is where I met one of my co-founders, Ryan. And he and I were actually building out simulation and dispatch services for Zoomer at the time, which was meal delivery. And very shortly after, we got kind of picked up by Grubhub and started building out what we called the decision engineering team at Grubhub. And this kind of existed in the space around decision intelligence and how basically to make decisions at scale. And so we were covering everything from forecasting and scheduling to automated dispatch to ETA management and real-time kind of supply and demand shaping. So it was really informative time because we realized there was just not a lot of good infrastructure for building the kinds of systems that we needed to automate. And I think that was kind of how we started Nextmv. We said, wow, this is really hard, and it's taking a lot of engineering resources and a lot of data scientists to build these algorithms and to deploy them. So let's build a platform around this and give the engineer better infrastructure.
Do you want to talk about what decision intelligence, decision automation, what all of that means?
Yeah, definitely. So I think it's kind of easy to start with the fact that billions have been invested in both data science and AI, and this is a fact, and people have been talking about this space for a while. You built on kind of the digitization era, which was make sure we have event data for everything, right? And then from there, you went to kind of BI. So, what's happening in my world, right? Can I understand what happened in the last week, et cetera? And then you went to data science, which was fundamentally answering the question of what is possibly going to happen, or predictive modeling. And really where decision intelligence is the next layer on top of that. So it is the space around what should I do about it, right? And so that's actually why we picked the name Nextmv. So what's your next move? It's really that space. And so if you think about that, it's kind of the next evolution of the data stack. I like to think about a simple example could be a subscription box. I am a user of Stitch Fix or Birchbox, right? And these types of companies, they may have a data science group that's working on what is the likelihood that I'm going to like an item, right? And so they're trying to predict, right, if I'm going to like this sweater. And that's awesome, except for they have tons of subscribers and they have a very limited inventory of this sweater. So how do they decide, which person gets this inventory? Right. And so they have limited inventory. They have lots of people. How do you decide who gets what items? And you probably want to try to maximize your ROI, right? I mean, every company is trying to impact that bottom line. And so in a company like that, you need to make that network level decision. And that could be something that we are doing manually. If it's an easy, it's 5 people and I have 10 items, cool. We can probably do that on paper. But when you start to have thousands of things and your planning space explodes to, thousands or millions of options, we should be using compute power for that. And that's really where decision intelligence comes in. So it's basically what should I do about all this data, insights, and predictions that I have.
Okay. And there is, I think, a lot of overlap with a space known as operations research.
Yes.
Is that correct? Do you want to talk about what is what the overlap is?
Yeah, definitely. So the space around operations research is really around optimization as a technology and simulation as a technology. And really, these are what we kind of refer to as decision-making paradigms. These are technologies that have been around for a while that are used to make decisions, but they are typically thought of in very academic communities and implemented on kind of legacy tech stacks. And so we use some of the platforms around that space. So you think about in the optimization space, thinking about solvers. Solvers are a fancy way of saying, hey, I'm going to generate all the possible plans and pick the best one based on my criteria. My criteria could be I care about not being late for a delivery service, or in the Stitch Fix example, I care about what is my maximum return, right, on that allocation, right? And so these are KPIs, if you want to think about it in the most general sense. And so operations researchers are these PhDs that are used to thinking about that space in mathematical terms. They take all of that business context that we just talked about, and they boil it down to matrix math. And so effectively they're translators. And they're translators that are, very well educated, obviously, and trained to use these legacy tech stacks. And they come into a business and they're trying to, optimize. They're trying to get that, that benefit of a 10% improvement on margin, right, for a delivery company, or, improving kind of how you allocate marketing budget or something like that.
What are some examples of those legacy software or products that people?
Yeah, some of the legacy players in this space are like IBM has a product called Cplex. FICO has a product called Express that we actually use in our prior work, and then also Garobi is a big one. So they kind of spun off of IBM a few years back. But these are platforms that people use in their academic research and then kind of take over into industry. And they've been used in kind of the DoD space. They've been used in manufacturing. Even scheduling airline traffic, right? And so these are the types of problems that they've tackled traditionally. In a funny way, I think they've taken on the helm of calling themselves data scientists also. So in a way, they're very, very specialized, like niche community within data science. But yes, and they're starting to kind of rebrand into this decision science. So we actually hire decision scientists within Nextmv, and we kind of feel that that's the space around how do you build, use, and implement these types of systems.
The other discovery for me, again, was that how broadly horizontal space it is. So like the simplest way of thinking about it is like all the routing problems and delivery and logistics and all the things, but that's actually a small part of like the very wide range of different use cases. Can you talk about some of those use cases across the enterprise?
Yeah, definitely. So I think that there's been some interesting ones recently. We're kind of working on a project right now with some folks around like how to basically route different X-rays to providers to give feedback, right? So like call center routing. And so people don't kind of like think about this as an optimization problem, but I thought this one was kind of interesting. It's like, if I had like a horrible break, right, and I'm looking for someone to read my X-ray, that was a problem that came up recently that we were working on. We have another customer who's doing like humanitarian aid. Like how do you allocate different resources to provide aid in the fastest manner and to cover the most need the quickest, right? And so like there's some different interesting applications there. I obviously talked about a little bit about like the matching and allocation problem around inventory with like subscription boxes. So there's that case, but there's also things around like pricing, price optimization, marketplace matching. So like, how do I efficiently match supply and demand? Really at the end of the day, like we kind of think about this as very horizontal. This should be like how you represent decisions for your operation as code, right? And that can be any operations decision, like how to allocate marketing spend into different channels, anything like that. So we really think of it that way.
And the fundamental premise of Nextmv is to effectively democratize this whole area, which has been the province of like math PhDs and sort of like older software platforms. How do you go about that? What's the sort of the thinking and ethos behind the product and platform?
Yeah, definitely. We think about making every engineer a decision engineer. So in the same way that Twilio gave a bunch of engineers the primitives around how to create messaging, right? We're giving people the primitives around how to make decisions. And so when we think about that, we think about our platform from the perspective of you and I should be able to sit here and define a new decision for our operation, whether that's allocating marketing budget or that is creating a dispatch service. We can define what the input output is, how we think about caring about it, and what the business rules are for possible plans, right? And so our platform enables kind of all those steps. You can build a model from scratch, defining input and output. You can push it into deployment, right? So deploy it via something like serverless, right? Or into our cloud architecture, right? And then you can also define what you care about, right? So that's the value function, or kind of fundamentally like what is guiding your decision. So defining that is the KPI that you care about. So that's kind of how we think about going about building it. And really we think about it as an end-to-end, decision automation platform, which is model management, which is the workbench basically for building and creating these things.
Great. So yeah, let's double click on that. And what are the different parts of the platform, and what can you do, and what kind of skills do you need to have as a developer to be able to use the platform?
Yeah. So the things that you can do, and I started with this, right? You can build any custom decision, right? So we think about, decisions being plans, right? And so like, how do you generate the plan that is addressing your business need? And so as a developer, you are typically already going to be thinking about this in the context of your business problem, right? You're going to say, okay, what is the input data that I can use to make this decision? What is like required? So in the inventory example, right? For Stitch Fix, I have to have all my potential inventory, and I have to have scores for inventory that matches to the people that I already have subscribed, right? And so that would be your input data. And so you're saying like, hey, this is my contract. This is my data contract between the model and my services. And so you can define that. You can define your output contract, right? And your output contract is what you're going to go operate on, what your system needs to go effectively make that plan a reality. So when we were at Grubhub, right, that would be, what is the route for a driver so that I can send it to a driver application, right? Because they need to see it. And so those assignments, that sort of thing. And so you can do both of those things. You can also define what's possible. So, I kind of touched on planning, right? And building this space of possible plans. You can literally guide that. You can say, I want to build plans by adding one delivery to one driver every single time, or adding one of those items to a box, right? And starting to build those boxes. So it's almost like a very, it's a state-based approach. So you're building these plans kind of iteratively. And that's what's allowing you to kind of think about that space in a more business, like practical manner versus having to think about it in like matrix now.
And so you have a cloud product. To talk about how people get involved with that, and I guess what it does.
Yeah, definitely. So we have our console. So you can actually go to that today. You can either access it through our website on nextmv.io, or you can go directly to our cloud.nextmv.io. That is where you can basically like sign up for a free account. You can start testing us. There you can see a demo model, which is just around routing. So you can kind of play with that and get a sense for what it means to have that JSON in, JSON out structure, what you can configure. You can configure different run profiles, stuff like that. And so we kind of think about that cloud platform and that console as, our workbench area. Like that's where you go to configure a decision. That's where you go to manage your account, et cetera. What we're really excited for is over the next few months, we'll be releasing our kind of like second generation of that console, and tying that to our Nextmv CLI, which will allow us to kind of do more customization than we have today, and kind of bring the full power of our SDK into like our cloud platform. And that would be for building like any custom decision. And so if anyone's interested in that, we have a waitlist going. So that waitlist is also on our website, nextmv.io/waitlist.
Great. So we talked about some broad use cases, sort of at a theoretical level, at the for the space. But let's talk about more concretely some of the customer use cases that you guys have experienced so far.
Yeah, we've had a couple interesting ones. So we have one customer who is working with us on kind of a bus like scheduling algorithm. So thinking about like how to efficiently schedule workers, and that there's basically different limitations around labor laws and like all that kind of stuff that go into that shift planning. So that is one interesting use case that we've come across. We also have some customers that are doing some interesting things around delivery ecosystem. So one customer is kind of rethinking the space around like hospitality. So they are actually taking kitchens that you would normally have at the hotel you're staying at, and centralizing them for a bunch of hotels and giving them like an upgrade in terms of chef and quality and that sort of stuff, and then delivering from there. So some really interesting things. And all of these systems kind of come with their own unique business rules and challenges, and all of the operations are unique. And I think that's what drove them to use Nextmv, is they want to be able to consider their uniqueness when they're building their algorithm, instead of being tied into just configuration.
So what's next for the company in the next year or two? What's on the roadmap? You alluded to some of this, but what's on the roadmap, and what do you want to be able to do?
Yeah, so we recently launched in our like cloud console the understanding of like configuration. So being able to configure different models. What we're excited about, kind of, and we're already prototyping now, is the ability to, like I said, create that custom decision and to push that up into our console environment, to collaborate on that with other users, and to really build on top of that. And so we're excited about that for a few reasons. Like, we're really intrigued by what developers will create, and what our users will create on top of this. Like, we've been in this space, like we've lived optimization simulation tech for a long time, and there's like this academic mindset around that for problems that it can apply to. But I think the cool part about a platform is you're really building generative technology. So we're excited about how people kind of stitch these pieces together, from the IO perspective to what their decision is. Ryan, one of my co-founders, built a Sudoku solver on top of our platform, right? I mean, like, that's silly and not really business relevant, but it's really interesting.
Can you do Wordle?
I really want a Wordle solver. We've been talking about it. I would like to be able to solve Wordle in milliseconds. That would be fantastic. So yeah, like, I think that's what we get really excited about. And so, like I mentioned, that next generation, like, console client-side SDK, that really is where we get to kind of open this up to a broader community in a freemium version, and allow people to really be creative and start building on top of this. So that's kind of what's coming next for us, is starting to be a little bit more out there in the community, potentially running some events like that, and hackathons and stuff like that, and getting people creating. I think that's the most exciting thing coming in the next year.
So shifting gears a little bit, one question from the group, and then another question from me, more like about the sort of company building aspect of the Nextmv story. So question: how hard was it to convince VCs that building a horizontal data platform was a good idea? Sounds like Matt was unaware of this field to begin with, and I find that VCs are quite skeptical of companies building horizontal from day zero.
Yeah, you should feel this one. No, I'm just kidding. No, I think it was challenging in the beginning, and part of it was storytelling, and I think that's actually a huge part of founding in general, is being able to tell your story. And there were a couple things playing in our favor. One, we had done this at Grubhub, and I think there was like that's a really big part of it, right? Understanding very intimately the challenges that we face building and scaling these systems at Grubhub, played nicely into that. And then the other aspect was just painting the picture. I mean, I think, and Matt, you can feel free to chime in here if you disagree, but, people are kind of aware of these data trends. And they're also aware that still, like, I think there's some absurd statistic that, like, Forbes published, which is like 87% of data science models don't make it into production, right? So there's a pipeline issue there, right? That is code based. And so I think when you start talking about, hey, we still have a gap between where we are from a data and insights perspective and predictions perspective to where operations is within a company, I think that really resonates with anyone that's kind of been in the operating space. And so that was ultimately, I think, what got a lot of the folks that we have on our cap table over the hump, is that they've really seen that play out in both their portfolio companies and maybe in their past jobs as well. Yeah,
absolutely. I would concur with all of this. And the reality is that you've also been honing on one sort of beachhead area initially around logistics and delivery. Yep. And that type of stuff. Following the good old principle that you need to be a tool before you become a platform, and that you have to just expand over time. So
exactly, and basically not boil the ocean. I mean, that was our tact, like, really early on, is like, okay, we're trying to create a new category here and really open this up to a whole new set of users. So those users fundamentally there's like an education aspect to it, like, what is it and what can it do and how powerful is it? And so you need to start with something very concrete. And so that was why we started with supply chain logistics, routing assignment problems, scheduling problems, et cetera.
Great. And then just one last question, because I think that's so cool and interesting for, like, all of us working in the world of startups. Nextmv has a policy of radical transparency when it comes to compensation. Like everybody knows what everybody else is making. Like what's the story there, the thinking, the pros and cons?
Yeah, I think, when we started the company, we talked about this for a couple of reasons. One, myself, like as a female founder, I found it really important just to kind of mitigate the wage gap. I think, a large part of the reason the wage gap exists is that women and minorities in technology are not necessarily willing or confident to negotiate. And I will throw myself out there as an example. I negotiated one salary in my entire career. And it wasn't even that much of a negotiation. It was just like, I kind of maybe sort of want this salary. And they said, okay. And so I think, that's a big reason. Like we wanted to take that like away from the discussion and say, this is how we value that work within Nextmv. And so everyone that is doing that job, that we're paying for the work product, right? And the work product is the same regardless of if you live in Kansas City and you come in as a decision engineer 1, or you live in Germany and you come in as a decision engineer 1. And so we took that tact really early on and just said, we pay the same for the same work product.
Great. I love everything about this. So cool. Look, that feels like a very nice place to end the conversation. But thanks so much for coming by and telling us about the Nextmv story, and obviously excited to see what's next. So thanks again.
Yeah, thank you, Matt.